Welcome to Thy Kingdom Come, as we bring you the scattering and gathering of God's people.
28, we read just a brief synopsis of the curse, but ultimately the bottom line was slavery, captivity. Sons and daughters being led into captivity. He even climaxes talking about you being sold off on slave ships. So that was a little piece of the curse. If we read the whole chapter, it was full of curses, all kind of other devastating things that was going to happen to Israel. But that is the real centerpiece of it, going into slavery. So now, but he already said here, after it's all over with, because before, at the beginning of Deuteronomy 20, he mentioned them being blessed for a moment. He said, if you do what I say, you're going to be blessed. But now when you mess up, he knew he was going to mess up. If you disobey me, you're going to be cursed to no end. This going to happen, this going to happen, I'm going to make this happen, I'm going to make this happen. And it always ended in slavery. So now he's talking about the complete end of all of that. It shall come to pass when all these things have come upon thee, the blessing and the curse, which I'm telling you about that day, back then. And what's going to happen?
Which I have set before thee. Thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations where the Lord thy God hath driven thee.
Okay, he said, look, when you start to wake up, you call them to mind. Remember, you've been scattered out, right? But eventually it got to come a time in your scattered state where you at in all these countries, went on slave ships, you're going to start to call to mind what's going on. You're going to start to figure out that this happened for a reason. That God got a hand in this. And you're going to start to realize you need to do something to rectify. And that's what we try to do here today. Turn back and obey God. That's why we done got away from traditional worship. Because this is what God calling us to do. He said, verse 2, and you shall return. Well, now, verse 1, he said, after the blessing of the curse, I said before thee, and thou shalt call them to mind, where among all nations, whither the Lord your God hath driven thee. So among these nations, you starting to wake up. And your priority need to be, verse 2, what?
And shall return unto the Lord thy God, and shall obey his voice according to all that I command thee this day, thou and thy children, with all thine heart and with all thy soul. Then the Lord thy God will turn thy captivity and have compassion upon thee, and will return and gather thee from all the nations, whether the Lord thy God hath scattered thee.
See, here you go, right here. You had to get scattered, but the Lord already left room for you to be gathered. He told you how it's going to happen. In the end, you're going to be scattered out. You're going to start to wake up among these nations. But the key to it all is verse 2, and you return unto the Lord your God and obey his voice. Not according to what the pastor said, right? Oh, not according to some man-made tradition, right? No, you obey his voice according to all that he commanded you back in the day. Back then. That's what he's saying in verse 2. According to all that I command thee this day. That was back then. Thou and thy children. He didn't give you no Sunday as a Sabbath back then, did he? He didn't say you could eat anything back then, did he? He didn't give you Christmas and Easter back then, did he? No. So we got to turn back to what was given to us back then. He said, thou and your children with all your heart, with all your soul. That's when. See, we at the point now where the Lord going to gather Israel from bondage. He said, that's when the Lord thy God, verse 3, will turn. Go ahead, read verse 3.
That then the Lord thy God will turn thy captivity.
Turn your captivity. You in captivity until that moment. But the Lord getting ready to turn it. Go ahead.
And have compassion upon thee.
And do what?
And will return and gather thee from all nations.
All nations, not just Egypt. All nations. Where you at?
Whether the Lord thy God hath scattered.
See, the scattering and the gathering of God's people. Go ahead, verse 4. He ain't going to miss nobody either. He going to bring everybody back, and the ones that want to be disobedient, he going to kill them in the wilderness. Just like he did in Egypt, didn't he? He brought all Israel out of Egypt. That was a happy day. They were singing, doing good. But you had some stiff-necked Israelites, as always. And the Lord said, y'all going to die right here in this desert. They didn't want to listen to God. See, that's going to be a shame. You're going to leave captivity just to die somewhere else. You should have just died there. But see, God going to show you the mercy of God. He's going to give you a chance. And we still going to be stiff-necked. So some of them gonna die, but he ain't gonna leave nobody in slavery. That's why he said, verse 4, what?
If any of thine be driven out unto the uttermost parts of heaven.
He said, I don't care where you at. You could be under a rock. You could be on the outmost parts of this world. What's going to happen?
From thence will the Lord thy God gather thee. And from thence will he fetch thee.
See, the Feast of Ingathering got great significance, don't it? Go ahead, verse 5. Let's see where you're going. We've been thinking, growing up with this false doctrine about going to heaven, right? Oh, I'm going to heaven. I can't wait to go to heaven. Let's see what the goal really is. Verse 5.
And the Lord thy God will bring thee into the land which thy fathers possessed.
It ain't about going to heaven, is it? He's talking about taking you into the promised land that your forefathers used to possess. But you got scattered out, right, for disobedience. But now you going back. Go ahead.
And thou shalt possess it.
Now it's your turn, and it's going to be good permanently. Go ahead.
And he will do thee good and multiply thee above thy fathers.
See, he going to bless you above your forefathers the way they were blessed. But now verse 4, he said, if any of thine be driven out to the outmost parts of heaven, he going to gather you. He referred to it as heaven because it's going to be heaven right here on earth. He's talking about the earth, though. He ain't talking about up in the sky heaven or up in the third heaven. He's talking about the earth heaven. That's where you scattered at, right? Or else you trying to tell me some people lost in space somewhere. Or they lost up there where God is. You know, God got to send some angels. Look, they went around the mountain in heaven and got lost. Go get them people. Nah, we talking on the earth. But he said, if any of them be driven out to the outmost parts of heaven. Okay, let's go to